our online events. My name is Elvin Box. I have the very real pleasure of being the Chair of London Constructing Excellence. We are delighted you have been able to join us this evening as we focus on an incredibly important subject. This evening's talk will commence in a few minutes with questions at 6:45 and a close at 7 p.m. So please do share your thoughts, feelings and observations of tonight's talk with the world through the various social media outlets. Please note our hashtag for this evening is LCEC CV19. Okay, due to popular demand, this evening's talk is another opportunity to participate in COVID-19, force majeure, frustration, and the insurer's response. Once again, our speaker is Jonathan Sharp from Silver Shemmings Ash. Jonathan has practiced in the city for close to 30 years and has a wealth of experience in the insurance industry. Jonathan regularly presents seminars and lectures to the public insurers, banks, and other lawyers on a range of subjects, including social media. This evening, Jonathan will be looking at contractual position if a closure is forced upon a site, for example, COVID-19. Specifically, where do you stand in terms of insurance policy? Is this specifically included in your T's and C's? Number two, are you covered for this type of closure? Three, what should you be doing now to ensure coverage? Four, what is the insurance market's advice? Jonathan will also cover the recent update from Lloyd's of London's CEO on what this means for the marketplace and your insurance policy. We are absolutely delighted that once again, we have been able to secure such expert practitioner from the legal profession for your enjoyment and edification this evening. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jonathan Sharp.
Well, thank you very much, Elvin, for that fabulous introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I trust you're all well, keeping safe, etc. Though I'm in Scotland, so I'm staying at home. Right, COVID-19, force majeure, frustration, and the insurer's response. I will briefly, that's me, though my details are on the website, but I think the less said about him, the better. For the purposes of this talk, I think it's just important that you note that I've been working in and around the insurance industry for now some 32 years.
Jonathan, would you be so kind to let everybody know how they should get questions to me via chat? We'll just give them a quick update where to go to chat, and then that way they'll get questions.
There should be on your screen a chat box, and if you activate that, you can send questions, I think, but directly to Elvin or possibly to Julie, I'm not sure which, but if you use the chat box facility and just type in a question, that will come to Elvin or to Julie, and they will ask me those questions at the end.
Yeah, I'd say if everybody sends chat to everyone, there's a fighting chance we'll be able to see the question. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John.
No problem at all. So as I said, just to 32 years working in and around the insurance market. Now, I'm going to put some caveats on this presentation, simply because since I first did this seminar, which must be what, I don't know, 7-8 weeks ago, things have moved on rapidly. So this seminar addresses insurance issues generally. Everybody's policy will differ, more about that later. It's as accurate as it can be, given the rapidly changing situation, and it cannot address too many specific situations. You should be speaking to your brokers, your lawyers, or your other advisors. However, obviously, if you do wish to contact me directly, then all my details are on the firm's website. Quick look at the agenda, whether COVID-19 is an act of God, general information about the virus and a couple of points on that, office policies, force majeure, frustration, the insurance market's current I think stance is better now than approach. Mitigation and travel insurance, and then a last slide will update you as to the latest developments. One thing COVID-19 is not is an act of God. There was much speculation in the press saying that insurance policies will respond because it's an act of God. It's an act of God. I'm afraid it isn't an act of God. Act of God is specifically defined in the case I shall refer to in a second. Possible causes, well, I think we all know that it seems to be that it was consumption of animals outside the food chain in a Chinese market. That was certainly the source of the SARS epidemic in 2003 to 2005, and likely the MERS epidemic in 2009 to 10. However, there are a number of conspiracy theories. Wuhan has the equivalent of what we call Pirbright. Pirbright holds a stock of viruses. It holds that stock so that when viruses mutate, you can compare the mutation against the original virus. Obviously, you have to make sure that's a very secure place. And there's a number of theories about, and some of them are very extreme, with regard to whether there was a leak or perhaps people in the authorities in China were up to no good. The Chinese are not assisting at the moment with any inquiry, as I'm sure you've read today. I'm not quite sure why. I will simply leave it at that. But you would have thought that you would want to cooperate with an inquiry when many thousands of people have been killed. But it's not an act of God. The current law is clearly set out in the decision of Lord Hobson in a case called Transco PLC against Stockport Metropolitan Borough Council. This case is referred to worldwide, and Lord Hobson was very succinct in what he defined an act of God as being. An act of God involves no human agency. Oh, I don't think we can say that. It's not realistically possible to guard against. It's due directly and exclusively to natural causes and could not have been prevented by any amount of foresight, plans, and care. So it is not an act of God. So what's known about the virus? Well, still very little. There's stories that it doesn't respond well to heat, doesn't respond well to alcohol. But the reason that this virus is successful as opposed to SARS in 2002 to about 2005 and MERS, which was 2009 to 11, is because when you had MERS or SARS, you knew you had it. There was no doubt about it. You were very ill. Whereas, as we all know, this virus, some people have it, it's no more than a couple of coughs and colds for a couple of days. You don't ring the doctor up about that. You just get on with it. And that's been the problem. Because whilst you have these coughs and colds, you're extremely contagious and you pass it on to others. So that's why this virus has been more successful than others. Obviously, governments around the world have taken a number of measures to try and prevent this. And there's been pretty much consistent government responses, as we all know: containment, delay, and mitigation or cure. Cure is still probably 2 to 3 months away, though maybe 6. Now, insurance policies generally, 2 points I want to make here. First of all, the difference between a cover note and a policy wording. I am still very surprised that the construction industry confuses cover notes and policy wordings. There is a world of difference between the two, and it's important differences. This is an example. In fact, it's our firm's policy schedule for what's called our Excel Business Combined. That covers the firm for public liability, employers' liability, office contents, etc. That document is a schedule which summarizes our policy. It is not our policy wording. It just simply says what roughly we're covered for and how much we are covered for in the event that one of those things happens. That's all it is. It's not your contract with your insurance company. This is. Now, you can't confuse the two. Your policy wording will be a lengthy document. Again, this is the policy wording that goes with our Office Excel policy. The summary on the previous page is 4 pages long. This, the policy wording, is close to 60 pages long. It contains detailed terms and conditions, exclusions, etc. This is your contract with your insurance company. So your cover note only identifies the main terms of your policy. It is not your contract with your insurance company. Never has been, never will be. Your policy wording is your contract with your insurance company. And when you take out any insurance policy, someone, your responsible officer, it should be for insurance, needs to read it to make sure that it meets your company's requirements. Now, in normal circumstances, if your business changes in any way throughout the year, so you take on new or unusual types of work, you need to update your underwriters. So your policy wording is a living document. It can change throughout the year. So if you are doing something new, tell your insurers. Normally you do that through your broker, but if you have taken out a policy online, there will be a mechanism whereby you can do that. When insurers receive the information, they will either confirm, yes, you are covered, or they'll say to you, well, actually, you're not, but we can cover you, but it's going to cost you a bit more premium. Okay, so it's important going forward in life that you all think about changes to your business. You do something new, tell your insurance company. Let's have a quick look at office policies before I turn to the position with regard to closure of sites. Most construction companies have offices, and they need to have these offices because you have extremely complicated machines that design plans, etc., etc., etc. Of course, you've not been able to go there for some considerable period of time. Are you covered? Well, it depends whether you've got what's called passive cover or intervention cover. I'll briefly explain the difference between the two. Intervention cover is your standard covers: fire, theft, flood. So something physically happens to your office, that means you can't go there. Now, those are contained in all policies. Even your most basic policy will provide cover for that. What you may not have is what's called passive cover. So something external to your office takes place, which means you can't go there. The classic one, though it is excluded in some policies, would be gas leak outside your office. Major gas leak, you have to evacuate, so can't get back. Equally, someone, say in the city, parks 2 suspicious vehicles outside the Gherkin. The police are called, they have to evacuate the area, and it takes them 2 or 3 days to deal with it. You're covered. Equally, if you had notifiable disease cover, there is an argument to say that that should also cover these situations. But it will depend on your policy wording. And there's another point that I really do want to stress. All policies have limits, and you still have a duty to prove your loss. Just because a policy says you're covered up to £100,000 doesn't mean that that's what you'll receive from your insurers. You have to prove that you've actually lost that £100,000, because insurance policies are policies of indemnity. That means they're designed to put you back into the position you were in before the incident occurred. Not better, not worse, the same. Another point you should note, irrespective of COVID-19, but it particularly applies to site closures. there will be a clause in your contractors or risk policies, and maybe in other insurance policies that you have, that says if a site is unoccupied for a period of 30 days, it may be less, then you must tell insurers that it's unoccupied. So make sure you do. Don't just leave a site closed and think it will be all right. It won't be. You need to tell your insurers that you have closed that site and how long you think it's going to be closed for and what security measures are in place in relation to that site. Now, what other might come to your aid in relation to contractual obligations? Well, first one is a thing called force majeure. Coronavirus is likely to cause delay to contractual obligations. I think we all know that. It is, quite frankly, stating the obvious. But if a contract contains a force majeure clause, this excuses one or both parties from performance of the contract if certain defined events occur. However, the problem you have is that most contracts and construction contracts don't define force majeure particularly well. Contrast that with a standard shipping construction contract where force majeure is very clearly defined. I'll just read you an extract from one which deals with force majeure. Force majeure is defined in the shipping contract as acts of God, acts of princes and rulers, requirements of government authorities, war or warlike condition, civil commotional riots, mobilization, sabotage, strike or lockout, quarantines, flood, typhoons, hurricanes, storms or other extraordinary weather conditions not included in normal planning, earthquakes, tidal waves, landslides, fires, explosions, collisions or stranding, import or export bans or restrictions, prolonged failure, shortage or restriction of electrical current, oil or gas. Now, that's nowhere to be found in any construction contract. How useful would it have been had that clause been in some of the construction contracts that we deal with on a day-to-day basis? So as said, force majeure has no fixed interpretation in English law, so each case will be individually considered by the courts, unless the circumstances are specified within the force majeure clause. If they're not, you have to go to court to get them interpreted. So businesses who think they could be affected by the pandemic should check the force majeure clause to see if it covers them and the circumstances that we find ourselves in at present. But let's learn from this. We didn't learn from SARS 2003, 2005. We didn't learn from MERS 2009, 2011. We haven't beefed up our force majeure clause accordingly. So in going forward, let's learn from this. When you're entering into new contracts, businesses should consider whether to include force majeure clauses appropriate to the type of business locations in which they operate, so the reference is made specifically to epidemics and to pandemics. The clause should also include potential government restrictions as a reaction to outbreaks and quarantine measures in large cities, the closure of public transport, etc. So let's learn, let's look at the force majeure clauses in the contracts that we enter into going forward, and let's beef up those clauses to cover this type of situation. What else might come to your aid? Well, it's the doctrine of frustration. But again, where there is no applicable force majeure clause, you could try the doctrine of frustration. And this says that a contract may be brought to an end where something unforeseen occurs after the formation of the contract through no fault of either party, but it has the effect that making it commercially or physically impossible to perform the contract. But again, you have to go to court to get this, and courts are very often unwilling to say that a contract has been frustrated because it terminates the contract and all its contractual obligations as if they never happened. So it will be much better if, when drafting new contracts, you put in a clause which specifically refers to events such as pandemics, rather than trying to use general law principles such as the doctrine of frustration. The key point is this, that going forward, those clauses in contracts which deal with delays, etc., need to be amended to take into account the situation that we now find ourselves in. So that would have the effect of stopping penalty charges running, etc. I fear that we will have a great deal of litigation after this crisis is over with regard to the lack of a force majeure clause in most of our major construction contracts. So, is the insurance market going to come running to our aid in our hour of need? Well, when I prepared these slides, I said possibly, but better work on the principle that it won't. I can now change that to it's not going to. Unless it's forced to, and I'll come on to that shortly. But the first thing you've got to identify is whether or not you had any cover at all. If you instructed your broker to take out the most basic of cover, chances are you won't have cover for pandemics, notifiable diseases, etc. You'll have a standard policy that does not cover those areas. Because pandemic cover, notifiable disease cover, is normally an extension to the normal policy wording. But if you were a company that wanted the maximum amount of cover, you will have said to your insurance broker, we want to buy the best cover that's available on the market. So you may well have some cover for this type of situation. Pandemic, notifiable disease cover. Now, where are you most likely to find it? Well, certainly in your business interruption clauses. But I can't tell you whether you've got it or not. I'm afraid, going back to my previous slide, you will need to read your policy wording to see what it covers and what it doesn't cover. Now, there is also, and you could buy this specifically, cover for delay in some insurance policies for receipt of essential supplies. Again, you need to read your policies to find this out. And I would suggest you get out every last single policy you've got, find the policy wording that attaches to it. If you can't find it, if you bought online, it will be available as a click button, but if not, your broker will supply it to you. Look at your contractor's all-risk cover. There are at least 4 different levels of cover on your contractor's all-risk cover. Have a look at it, read the policy. And as I've already described, look at your office policy. Did it cover passive or was it an intervention cover? It will clearly say that in the policy wording. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying for 1 minute that policy wordings are an easy read. They are far from it. But what you need to do is to find out whether or not you have got that cover before you start thinking about making a claim. I then put a slide in that said, what will assist the fact that coronavirus has now been declared a pandemic and a notifiable disease? Well, that was a bit of a double-edged sword, because insurers are now saying, oh, well, we never intended to cover any pandemics. And if you haven't got notifiable disease cover, you're not likely to be able to make a claim. But as I said, you need to establish, first of all, whether you have got potentially that cover. Insurers are also trying to argue that this outbreak is not within the reasonable contemplation of either party when the insurance cover was taken out. And from probably about the 1st of February, they were restricting cover offered on new policies, and they were excluding cover in relation to viruses, pandemics, notifiable diseases, etc., in about every new insurance contract. So you realistically needed to have taken out your policy probably before the 23rd of January last year. Sorry, this year. If you've taken it out after that, then it's unlikely that there will be cover, or it will now be excluded. If you are fortunate to have policies that include some kind of cover for notifiable diseases, then you still have a duty to mitigate your loss. That means you can't just close your office door and walk away, even if you have passive office cover. You must have waited until the government says you must close your office before you actually did so. If you do something voluntarily, without advice from government bodies, etc., insurers say, well, that was your choice, we're not covering you for that. Now, the government did tell everyone to leave their offices. There is a debate going on about whether that's covered in itself, but my view is that that probably is covered. Of course, you could have made the decision to close your office because you did actually have an outbreak of COVID-19. Someone in your office could have been ill, or 2 people, or 3 people. And you think we're not taking any chances here. And if those people have subsequently been diagnosed with COVID-19, that's a very, very, very useful tool in your armory. It would also probably apply if they were taken ill on a building site. Now, in terms of business interruption, you must still continue to operate your business to the best of your ability. Again, you can't just simply say, well, we're covered for X amount of money, we'll shut the shop, That's not how it works. You must continue to operate your business to the best of your ability in order to minimize the claim that you can make on your insurance policy. If you take intervention cover, a warehouse gets flooded, insurers expect you to take the stuff out of the water and get it up. It may still be ruined and damaged beyond repair, but they don't expect you to leave it lying about the place. Now, I've been asked this question 4 times today already, and I cannot stress it enough. Notification. You must inform your insurers as soon as possible that you may be making a claim. You don't have to be specific about what sort of claim you're making at this stage on your business interruption policy or any other part of your policy which contains pandemic or identifiable disease cover, but you must tell them you're going to. You leave it too long, insurers will say that's late notification and we will not cover you. As I said, for business interruption, sorry, saying this slide, for business interruption, I think it's probably too early to claim yet. But once you've had 2 or 3 months figures, you'll have an indication of what amount of money you're losing at the present. But notify. If you don't notify, and normally notification policies on insurance policies are conditions precedent. So fundamental to the policy. You don't comply with the terms, then regrettably, I am afraid insurers will walk away and they will be supported by the courts. Lastly, at this time, you must communicate continually with your brokers, so ask them what you need to be doing in these current circumstances. Be guided by them. Just for once, they are on our side. They are distinctly unhappy with insurers' current approach of COVID-19. It's got nothing to do with us. So they will guide you, but you must tell them what types of claim you'll be making and notify insurers accordingly. Just a quick word on travel insurance before I update you where we are with the insurance position. It's very unlikely now that travel insurance will cover cancellation or delays as a result of coronavirus. Again, you needed to have taken out your policy by mid-January of this year. The reason I say mid-January is that Wuhan was effectively shut down on the 23rd of Jan. That's when it really started to hit home, and that's when people thought, ooh, and the insurance companies in particular started to think, we have a problem. But if you've got a travel policy which you took out before the coronavirus pandemic hit, do not under any circumstances voluntarily cancel your holiday. So you booked a holiday on the 1st of January to go to the Maldives in September, don't cancel it. Maybe at the moment the government's advice at the moment is that you shouldn't travel there, but that may change by September. And if it does, and you've cancelled your cancelled your holiday, insurance won't pay you. So don't do anything voluntarily. They will say it's your decision to cancel and not something that you were forced to do by the United Kingdom government or by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. You took the decision to cancel. We ain't going to pay you. The world may still be a very different place in September, October. And if you've made forward plans, do not cancel your holiday. Last word, this farce with regard to if you have had your flight cancelled, vouchers or your money back, I can categorically assure you that every consumer body, the government's own advice, everything else is that you should be getting your money back. A voucher may suit some people, but it's an option that you can take if you want to. If not, it's money back. We all have to tick a box that says we've signed the terms and conditions, and just about everyone that I've looked at clearly says and clearly states that in the event of cancellation, you are entitled to a full refund. Now, let me just update you as to what the current position is with regard to insurance and the various responses of various authorities, because it is slightly better news in relation to some areas. Firstly, there was at first an indication that the government would intervene in relation to insurers' stance that they weren't going to pay and effectively force insurers to pay. They could have done that. The government has now made it very clear that it's got no intention of doing so. So it very much is between, if you like, insureds and insurers. However, there has been a number of very, very, very useful indications from various authorities, various people, that they are expecting insurances to respond. The chairman of Lloyd's, the third largest insurance market in the world, has clearly said pandemic contagious disease extensions, where such extensions are provided on business interruption or contingency covers, Lloyd's would expect this to include losses related to COVID-19. Now, the chairman of Lloyd's is the chairman of Lloyd's. He can't directly order his syndicates to pay in accordance with his instructions. He can't do that. It's not within his remit. What he can do is guide his market. Now, he's said that. He's also said, by the way, if people are struggling to pay their insurance premium at the moment, he has also said Lloyd's expects underwriters to ensure that they do not automatically cancel policies for consumer and small businesses by reason solely of the application of non-payment of premium clauses for a period of non-payment up to at least 60 days. So you shouldn't have had your insurance policy cancelled simply because you've been unable to pay the premium. Again, though, that's only his guidance. He can't bind the market into doing what he expects them to do. All he can say is, I'm expecting this, and I'll be a bit disappointed if you don't. Well, I'm not quite sure, as we know, what insurers' reaction to that will be, but I suspect it's really not going to change their stance at the moment of, if it's to do with COVID-19, we aren't covering. However, much better hope on the horizon from insurers' regulator, the FCA. Now, the FCA is not a weak regulator. It's not like the water regulator, for example, who manages to fine water boards £250 if they've been a naughty boy. Or like the electricity regulator, who must know it's all a bit of a cartel here, but does absolutely nothing about it. The FCA has got serious teeth. I think its record fine is 39 billion in respect of Barclays, though I may be wrong on that, but it imposes serious fines and directs the market. If the FCA says to a regulated body, you will do this, it does it. Now, the FCA are very aware of the anger that's being directed at insurers at the moment, in particular in relation to business interruption claims. The reason everyone is so angry about it is that normal policies do not contain these extensions. You had to ask for it. And once you've asked for it, you're expecting it to respond. So, what the FCA have said is that whilst it doesn't think there is necessarily cover for COVID-19, they have made it very clear that where there are policies that should be paying out at the moment, they're expecting them to pay out and to pay out promptly. The letter that I managed to get my hands on says, a key objective of the FCA is to ensure that financial pressures on policyholders are not exacerbated by slow payment. Rather, such claims should be paid as soon as is possible. This is consistent with the wider objective of the authorities to support business and consumers during the current crisis. Also, the overriding expectation of the FCA is that all customers must be treated fairly. Now, there has to be an argument at present that customers have certainly not been treated fairly. We all bought cover which we thought would cover us for this situation, only to find when we claim that insurance says, no, it doesn't. Not sure that that is really treating your customer fairly. The FCA have now said very publicly that they are going to take, I think, 17 policy wordings to court to have the wording interpreted. So the key issue, the key message is that do not abandon your business interruption claim or any other claim that you may have if you had pandemic notifiable disease cover. Keep a note of your losses. Do not give up on it. Notify the claims, because we will shortly get some pretty clear resolution as to what's covered and what isn't. You will still have to prove your loss, but that's a slightly different subject. So keep your records, make your claims, and when insurers come back to you and say it's not covered, object and say, we think you've misinterpreted the policy. You should be we are reserving our position. Any further good news? Well, yes, there is. Barristers have been looking at the various problems, and in particular, one barrister, Geoffrey Gruder QC at Essex Court Chambers, he's looked at one clause, and the clause, I'll read you the clause, says as follows. It's under the heading infectious disease, murder or suicide, food or drink or poisoning. And then it goes on, loss resulting from interruption of or interference with the business in consequence of any of the following events. Number C is any occurrence of a notifiable disease within a radius of 25 miles of the premises. As Mr. Gruder goes on to say, and I hope I do council's language justice here, coverage in relation to paragraph C, coverage is not restricted to the consequences of any event actually occurring at the insured premises. Indeed, there need not to be an occurrence at all at the premises at all. There is cover if losses as a consequence of any occurrence of a notifiable disease within a radius of 25 miles of the insured premises. No doubt this cover was introduced to provide indemnity where the presence of a notifiable disease, even some distance away from the insured premises, causes a proven drop-off or even a total cessation of trade. The council goes on. When the government lockdown was ordered, there were occurrences of a notifiable disease, COVID-19, within a radius of 25 miles of, at the very least, many of the premises insured under this form of policy wording. After all, COVID-19 was a pandemic which was rampaging in most parts of the UK by that time. It is apparent that the figures for actual cases of COVID-19 from early March 2020, if not earlier, drastically understated the number of COVID-19 infections amongst the populace, and not only because many cases were undetectable, but also because of the absence of an efficient and effective testing program. He adds, nature does not work in watertight compartments, especially where notifiable diseases spread by viruses are concerned. So the advice at the moment, I think, is to keep your records, make the claims, notify promptly, because there is a way to go yet. Under no circumstances, give up on making claims where you had pandemic or infectious disease cover. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'll be delighted now to take questions, if indeed there are any. If not, then not a problem.
Right, John, thank you very much for that, my friend. I've got a couple of questions to ask you, if that's okay.
No problem, Melvin.
Excellent. If you could just clarify here, the question is, who would it be who drafts a detailed force majeure clause? The question is, it's JCT, NEC, or FIDIC, but I'd rather think you can answer that better than I can.
Look, it's pretty common within the construction industry, and it is, I regret to say, that this is not with my, not wishing to criticise at all, but it's fairly common for people to get the appropriate JCT contract for the type of work that they're doing, and then frankly amend it themselves and add in clauses, etc., etc. Now, I would suggest, I can't see JCT amending it particularly quickly, or indeed any other body. So I would just get a lawyer to give you a force majeure clause. The one I quoted from a shipping contract in these circumstances would have been ideal. And just insert it into the contract or add it as an appendix and both parties sign. That would be the quickest way to make it contractually effective. Because yes, I can well see calls for JCT, etc., to amend their force majeure clauses, but that will take time. If you're about to enter into new contracts, you may not have that time. So just having one drafted for you and adding it in, I would have thought was the quickest way to get round that particular problem.
Excellent, John. Hopefully that is answered, because it seems a perfect answer to me. Obviously, if you have any questions, please do just ask away. While John's here, there's a second question to ask you, John.
Yeah.
And if I can just find it for you, 2 seconds. Right, sir. Are insurers obliged to identify if you are entitled to make a claim, or is it your responsibility to find the relevant clause?
Right. It is your responsibility to make the claim. Insurers will never, ever, ever, ever say, please claim. So you've got to look at your policy wording. But if you have, and I stress the importance now of having a good broker. If you have a good broker, he should already be telling you what to do. But you need to be proactive. You need to read your policy wording, say, well, look, I think there's a claim here. I'm going to make a claim. The worst insurers will do at present is come back to you and say it's not covered, in which case you say, I don't think you've interpreted the policy correctly. I'm reserving my position and I'll claim in due course, but I've notified you that I think there is a claim. Now, it's not insurers' job to tell you, and they won't tell you. You have to do it. But as I said, if you've got a good broker, an FCA regulated broker, they should be advising you. In fact, it's their legal duty to do so. The insurance broker in a direct insurance situation, it's different with a thing called reinsurance, but with a direct insurance situation, which most of you will be in, it's their duty to protect your interests, to basically stand in your shoes and assist you in making claims.
Okay, John, that seems very, very clear and succinct. Please, everybody, do ask questions. We've got some more time. More than happy to take them from you. I have one question, John. The point being made that currently people will go away from this evening far more knowledgeable of insurance contracts, and also not only the contract but the responsibilities therein of those people who would like to make sure that they are claiming correctly, and also really importantly they are updating their policy. As you said, it's a live document. Is there 3 things that people should go away with this evening after listening to this and say, right, there's 3 things we must do now we know this as a professional person? 3 things I will check in the morning.
The first thing you should do is, let's forget COVID-19 for a minute. Just forget it. Put it to one side. Let's assume that things return to normal within a couple of months. You need to make sure that your insurance policy covers your business, the activities that it's currently undertaking. That means you need to look at your business as a whole and say, right, this is what we primarily do, but do we do other things as well? You need to sit, or someone needs to sit, in a dark room and read the policy wording to make sure that there is proper and adequate coverage. If you take on new work in the brave new world, or work of a different type, or indeed change the way in which you're working, tell your insurance broker or tell your insurance company. Far too many times people do not, so that's the first thing. Second thing is read your policy wording. I can't stress that enough. Someone needs to sit down in a dark room quietly and read it. You may find that you have a very large excess on a particular piece of work that you do all the time. Well, that's not going to do you any good if the excess easily exceeds the amount of your claim. Need to read your policy wording. And the third thing I would take away, going back to COVID-19, is check your policies at the moment. If you have the slightest hint of notifiable disease cover, then make your claim, and make it now. Do not wait. Insurers have at the moment put up a wall saying we're not paying. They're being attacked. That wall may not come down completely, but it certainly may well crumble around the edges or have a big hole in it in the middle. And if you haven't made your claim, the last thing you want is an insurance company turning around saying, sorry, late notification, you didn't tell us. bye-bye. So those three things. Going forward, check that your policy now covers your normal activities. If it doesn't, tell your broker getting expanded. Read your policy in any event to make sure it covers your business. Check it for COVID-19 cover, and then notify your broker accordingly so he can make the appropriate claim. Is that okay, Elvin?
That sounds to me brilliant, John. Absolutely. Please, everybody, if you want anything clarified there, send me forward a question. Another question for you, John, which is, what is considered reasonable time in notifying insurers of a claim?
Again, it depends on your policy wording. Some say immediately. However, normally it's within 30 days. But I have to stress this, and I will stress it and stress it and stress it. It will be in your policy wording under the heading notification. And you need to notify as soon as you become aware of any circumstances, even in normal time, that may lead to a claim. If you do not, then I regret insurers, because they will have made it what's called a condition precedent, will walk away. So you have got very little time. And as COVID-19 has effectively been certainly affecting businesses since March the 16th, you need to get on and make your claim now. Tomorrow, before you have your breakfast.
That's very clear, very, very clear. Thank you for that. That's excellent advice, John. I've got another question, but before I ask the question, please do be aware, repeat it again, slides will be available on the London Construction Excellence website, and a recording of this particular event will be available on Silver Shemmings' YouTube channel. But just to let people know that, and thank you very much for asking me on the question. We have a question here, and to me, I wish to God I'd thought of this because it's so damned obvious. Are we covered for working from home for an extended period on the business insurance or home insurance? Do you need to advise household insurers that they are working from home? Brilliant question.
No, it's a very good question, and I'm in charge of the firm's insurances, and I woke up with a sleepless night thinking, oh my God, what are we doing here? Because we are all at the moment working from home. Now, I instructed our brokers when we took out what's called our office combined policy to get the best possible maximum cover they could possibly get. And in that, our policy covers employees working from home, bizarrely, whilst they're working. Now, I'm not quite sure how, if I get up from my computer where I am working, and I don't know, I fall over the little step out into the garden, how insurers are going to say, well, was he working or not? But I assume that the policy will be interpreted that you're working from home between normal business hours. Outside of that, no, you're not covered. So, but you also, two things. You need to get all staff that are working from home complete what's called a DSE certificate, basically a health and safety check, so that you can make sure that they can work safely from home. So they've got a desk, a chair. They're not typing from their beds, for example, because that's not health and safety compliant. Once staff have done that, and you've had them all returned to you, you're pretty sure, well, our cover certainly says you are fully covered working from home. All our business equipment is covered worldwide. So staff working from home on our laptops, mobiles, etc., that's all insured as well. And I have gone further because I know exactly what my good friends, the insurance companies, are like. I have emailed my broker and said, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. This is our intention in relation to returning to our office. Have insurers got any problems with any of this? If they have, tell me now. And they've come back and said, no, that's fine. We understand. Doing what everybody else is doing, you're covered. So you cannot be too careful, though. It's better to fire an email to your insurers and say, we're all working from home. Are we covered for health and safety risks? Is our equipment covered, etc.? So don't leave it to chance. It's not, for the sake of a 3-line email, it's not worth it. And tell insurers, we're intending to go back to work. I've said at the moment, maybe mid-June. Because in your office policy as well, you will find that there is the same for construction sites, a 30-day unoccupied clause, and then they don't cover you. So tell them, do not leave it to chance.
Brilliant answer, John. Brilliant. I've got one last question for you, John, as someone's very kindly asked it.
Yeah, no problem, Elvin.
Very good question. If an insured needs to continue its business to the best of its ability to mitigate its losses, how does that balance with the commercial costs of doing so, where it may not be successful in recovering all or some of those costs under its business interruption policy? Have I made that clear, John?
Yeah, no, I get your point. So, you know, it's costing you more to keep trying to keep going than you're actually making in profit, is the short point, I think.
Yes.
And you're not sure whether you're going to get that back from your business interruption. Well, I think the answer is you should, first of all, tell your insurers that. Yeah. Say, look, we've tried to continue, but actually it's costing us more to continue running. We're just going to have to shut down. Yeah? Especially as you guys haven't confirmed whether we've got business interruption cover. There's no harm in putting in that little sentence to whet their appetite a bit. But take, for example, probably the best example is a pub. Pub shut down, can't have people in it, can't do beers, etc. Yeah? But what it can do, and I suspect not unprofitably, is run a takeaway service. It might do fabulous burgers, I don't know. It's operating some of its business to make some money to reduce its losses. If you are in a situation whereby keeping the business open is just not cost effective for you, then the best thing to do is to say to insurers, we have tried this for a couple of weeks. Frankly, we're leaking money. It's going to be more cost effective for us to shut down. But tell them. If they then come back to you and say, well, you must try and carry on, well, you have to try and think of something. But that's what the position is.
I think just a brilliant answer. I think if people go away, it's very much a lovely clause in legal clauses. It's fair and reasonable.
Yes, I mean, underwriters are expecting you to mitigate your loss as far as you possibly can. But clearly, if you're operating a business where it's very employment dependent, you've got lots of employees, you know, you may as well think that you might have to have made the decision, I'm going to furlough these employees until I can open the site again properly so we can get properly back to work without the social distancing and without the other restrictions that I think have been recommended by the Confederation of Builders sort of thing.
Right.
But again, the key to all this is insurers find it very difficult to wriggle if they've been told.
That's probably
if
one
they've
of the
been told,
messages.
and then they come back 3 months later and say, "Ooh," you go, "Well, I told you." Sorry, you had every opportunity to say that's not acceptable. You should be doing this. Should be doing that. Should be doing the other. Because you're in the position to advise us as to what to do. I told you what we were doing. You didn't come back to me. Now, no court, especially after the Insurance Act of 2015, which was put in place to make it harder for insurers to wriggle over the small print. It's not done very well so far, but I have high hopes. Then, you know, that will stand up in court. Well, hang on, the insured told you what he was doing. It took you 3 months to come back to him. What's he supposed to do? Live in some sort of vacuum in the meantime?
Yeah.
But
Excellent.
the other key point, Kelvin, because I think we'll have to finish now, but just the last point. So I really do want to stress, we are not over this fight yet. So please keep your records, keep a note of your losses, make your claims, because there's every chance that you will eventually get something back. But if you can't prove your loss, you're not going to be able to do that.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Oh, then I'm
John,
going to stop. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, so if that's okay.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you very much, John. So, everybody, I just want you to note one more time that there is a recording of this evening's event, and it will be on Silver Shemmings' YouTube channel, and the presentation will be uploaded to the London Constructing Excellence Club's website. Our next event is an online conference at 6 p.m. Tuesday, the 9th of June, on the National Digital Twin with Mark Enzer, Chief Technical Officer Mark MacDonald, and Chair of the Digital Framework Task Group. Full details can be found and bookings made from our wonderful website. So please, as a roundup, please, very grateful thanks to the hard-working Committee of London Construction Excellence and your very good self for brilliant participation this evening. Thank you so much for your excellent questions. And of course, many, many thanks to our guest speaker, John Sharp, and his wonderful colleague, Julie Camp. Good night, everyone. Stay alert and look forward to interacting with you next month. Good night.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.